Okay. Okay, fine. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. This is the third live session of our course on poetry. Earlier, we promised that we would look at a sample descriptive piece of writing. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. This is the third live session of our course on poetry. Okay. I have chosen a poem for you. The poem I sent it by mail. I hope some of you were able to see that poem. The author is Polly Murray, and the poem is called To the Oppressors. It's a very short poem, so that it is easy for us to analyze it in depth. We can pay enough attention to understand the nuances of this poem, the chosen poem. To the Oppressors. Is a poem. Now, let's read the poem. I'll read it slowly. In case you don't have the copy, you can follow it without much difficulty. Please try to get the copy and keep it with you in your hand so that it will be easier for you. Please check our mail, course mail. I sent the poem to you this afternoon. Now you are strong. That's the beginning. Now you are strong, and we are but grapes aching with ripeness. Crush us. Squeeze from us all the brave life contained in these full skins. But ours is a subtle strength, potent with centuries of yawning, of being kegged and shut away in dark, forgotten places. We shall endure to steal your senses in that lonely twilight of your winter's grief. That's it. This is a very short poem. It will be good for us to count the number of lines, even the number of words. It's easy for us because it's very short. I gave you a few questions in some of the lectures in our course. As we approach a poem, we can ask the question, what is the title of the poem? And how does that title relate to the rest of the poem? Does the title give us any clue to understand the whole theme of the poem? Normally, the central subject of the poem, we will be able to see in the title itself. The title of this poem is To the Oppressors. To the Oppressors. That means it's like a dedication. It's an address to the oppressors. It's a challenge to the oppressors. If the relationship between the addresser and the addressee is positive, it could be a dedication. dedication in appreciation of somebody's generous gesture. But in this case, we have a relationship which doesn't seem to be very positive because the title is Oppressors to the Oppressors. Who would write a poem to the oppressors? That's how we can ask a secondary question to our primary question: what is the title of the poem? The title is To the Oppressors. And so, who is writing to the oppressors? Then, one more question we can have: who are the oppressors? Oppressors generally will have more power than people who are oppressed. So, when you read the poem, and also if you learn a little about the author, you can do it much better. Sorry. Polly Murray is a woman, so you can easily guess a woman rise to her oppressors, that is, men. So she examines the relationship between the oppressors and the oppressed. She begins, let me read out again. We have looked at the title, we have seen the addresser and the addressee. The addresser is a woman, an oppressed person, and the addressee is here in plural form, men in general, or patriarchal society, we can call it. So, the theme of the poem will be related to this relationship between the oppressed and the oppressor. We can have more questions. Does the poem support the oppression? Or does the poem criticize the oppression? You will naturally see that this writer is a woman, and we can also assume that the speaker is a woman. Let me read it again. Now you are strong, and we are but grapes aching with ripeness. Crush us. Squeeze from us all the brave life contained in these full skins. But ours is a subtle strength, potent with centuries of yearning, of being kegged and shut away in dark, forgotten places. We shall endure to steal your stances. We shall endure to steal your senses in that lonely twilight of your winter's grief. The poem directly addresses the oppressor. Now, at the moment, you are strong. When you are strong, then what are we? We are not strong enough. And that's where it becomes a poem, and the poet uses a metaphor. And we, that is, women, we are but grapes aching with ripeness. We are grapes, fruit, and grapes can be easily crushed, and crushed, squeezed, and the juice is drunk. And in this context, who is a person who is going to drink it? The men. And so these grapes are meant to be crushed. You men crush us, women. And when you crush, what happens to us? squeeze from us all the brave life. Grapes have some juice or sap, and this sap is squeezed. As we refer to women, the life, the brave life of women is squeezed, crushed, contained in these full skins, the body with the skins, the grapes with the skins. There is, if you pay attention to the word contain, you can also see contain, containment, having some kind of control over some area or some people. Now comes but. In contrast, but now you, the first line says, but now you are strong. But when we come to the sixth line, we can see, but ours is a subtle strength. Yours is a strength, but ours is a subtle strength, which remains unseen, which remains unused, which is inherent in the mind and body of women, potent with centuries of yawning, potent, powerful, centuries, not just 100 years, 200 years, many hundreds of years. That's why centuries of yawning, desire, strong desire. What is that desire for? Desire for freedom. That's what we can easily guess. Of being kegged and shut away. Keg is something like a container which is closed and kept under the earth for the grapes to give wine, shut away and kept for a long time in dark, forgotten places. Nobody will see that for a long time. It's a dark place where the barrels of wine are kept, and they may be forgotten even. And later on, when it comes to use, they will dig it out and find the wine which is powerful, which is very useful. And during this time, such a long time, what do? We shall endure to steal your senses in that lonely twilight of your winter's grief. Now, as oppressed women, they have grief. They don't have happiness because men crushed women. And later on, when the wine comes out of the earth in barrels, the senses of men are stolen. And at that time, women have more power. This one single image or one metaphor that you can see in this poem relating to men and women through that one object, wine or grapes or wine from grapes, kept in the barrel for a long time under the earth and then unearthed again for the use of men. What a powerful poem you can see in these short lines. You can count the number of lines. We have just about 13 lines. We can look at the appearance of the poem. We have 9 lines in one stanza and 4 lines in another stanza. The division between 9 and 4 can also tell us something very interesting about the power of men and the power of women. Women may have been kept under the dark for a long time, but when they come out, when they are going to use their freedom, they will emerge very powerful. And this power, freedom of women, may give grief to men in winter That again is symbolic of the decline of men. Power is a kind of cycle, it keeps moving. Who is powerful one day will lose the power and become powerless after some time. So, men on top and women at the bottom of the power structure. Now, after so much of long time, we see that women are going up to the top of the ladder, and men will have to share the power with women, or men will have to come down so that women are able to occupy positions of power to the oppressors. It's such a beautiful poem that we have in these 13 lines. Why 9 lines and why 4 lines in two different stanzas? We can ask this question, and you can see the inequality in our society. Somebody occupying more space than somebody else. You are familiar with this lion's share. Lion's share of power has been used by men for a long time, and just recently we saw in our feminist course how women struggled very hard to get voting rights, how they struggled hard to get employment, and then again how they worked very hard to get equal pay. And you know very well, even after getting voting rights, employment, equal pay, they are not yet free from oppression in our employment scenario. We can we keep on coming up with many legal mechanisms, social mechanisms to help women live their life with the dignity, with the freedom. Now, remember, this is a poem. We have looked into the poem briefly, and I see some of you are sending some points here. Harsh Mishra has noted this alliteration in line number 3 and 4. Yes, when you discuss metaphor, when you discuss alliteration, please quote the words and lines in your descriptive essay. There was a question regarding this descriptive type or objective type. Please remember, our course is meant for 100 marks, our examination is meant for 100 marks, and 80 marks you will have objective type, 20 marks you will have descriptive type. That means you have to write some 150 or 200 words. We have mentioned the word limit, and 4 poems, short poems you have given. You have to write about these 4 poems. These are very short poems, 10 lines, 12 lines, not more than 20 lines, any poem. So within a short time, you should be able to analyze it. So the whole course has trained you to look into the poems through this method or procedure. First, look at the thematic contrast. We went into the poem, examined the poem specifically for understanding the poem. Only then we can analyze a poem. That's why we spend some time on reading the poem. Read the poem once, twice, thrice, doesn't matter. Yes, I see Vinita coming up and telling us apostrophe. Yes, now you are strong. The addressee is not present. If the addressee is present, then it may not be apostrophe. So addressing a person in absence is apostrophe. Very good. So you can identify all these figures we have analyzed. Any 1 week's course, if you read thoroughly with close attention, you can learn how to analyze a poem very easily. We have given a historical account of our poetry course because we need to know how we have written poems, how we have experimented with the different forms, how we have innovated in different ways to write poems. Now, Given the fact that you have come across many sonnets, you can see here we have only 13 lines. Normally, we don't have a poem with 13 lines. 10 lines may be there, 12 lines may be there, 14 lines may be there. But here, in this case, a specific division, this poet, Polly Murray, comes up with 9 plus 4, some kind of innovation experiment. The poet tries to imply. Yes, again, we have this contrast. Vinita has identified man, woman. Yes, oppressor and oppressed. One who oppresses is oppressor, and one who is oppressed is the oppressed or victim. Victor and victim, you can use another word like that as well. Exploited and exploiter, or one who exploits. So we can have that. In When we further see the look at the first line, now you and we, this is the contrast in pronoun terms. You can see you and we. This is the contrast between you, that is men, we, women, and then strong. You are strong, we are weak. That is the implied meaning. But the poet does not give us the fact that women are weak. And though the metaphor is used, metaphor of grapes, wine, crushing, these are all used, the images are used, visually we are presented how women are squeezed, crushed, oppressed, exploited. But that sense of weakness is not brought to us lexically. We can see that visually. The physically somebody may be exploited or oppressed or even beaten black and blue, but the mind of the oppressed person need not be actually damaged. That's the kind of spirit of determination to withstand the oppression. That's what you can see. Now you are strong, but in the sixth line you can see that word but clearly tells us we are, I mean, the poet doesn't claim that we are strong, but she says ours is a subtle strength. The strength that you see, you can challenge, you can manage to defeat, but the subtle strength which you cannot see, the strength which is invisible, is not easy to attack. It's not easy to conquer. And that is something interesting. You can see, yes, uh, grief is mentioned, and actually you are strong. That idea of strong should imply happiness. You are happy, you are making wine, you are drinking, you are using the labor of somebody else, like women. You must be happy. But the end of the poem, strength, from the poem moves from the strength of men to the grief of men. That means they have lost. When do you feel grief? When there is some sense of loss. So women gain strength. When women gain strength, men lose strength, and that leads to the grief. Winter's grief. Summer's grief is different. That is something very interesting. Winter symbolically is connected with some suffering, loneliness, loss, even loss of life. So when you lose life, when you lose your beloved, or when you lose some possession, you feel aggrieved or bereaved. So that this grief comes at the end. Next, the whole poem is all about life and death. How people living life normally in a patriarchal society is lived by exploiting women and the marginalized people. Do we have to live like that? And this life of exploitation or oppression, where does it lead to? And this grief is mentioned loss, and the loss of life implies death. So life and death also can be seen in this. And then we have the word twilight. Twilight is a time of evening. So it implies that there is some dawn or morning time. Morning time is happy, normally hopeful, sunny. It gives some kind of hope. But evening indicates the arrival of dark or darkness. So we can see this kind of and twilight also is something very interesting. It is preceded by the adjective lonely. Lonely twilight. Who's lonely twilight? People who are lonely, they drink, they abuse others, they become eccentric. In that lonely twilight of your winter's grief. So look at all those oppressed people who are power hungry. Usually they'll be lonely, hungry for power. And those people will try to always oppress others. So dawn and twilight. And also I have used another word instead of happiness. That is when you have grief, when you have some bereavement, what you need is consolation. And I believe, as I have told you, poetry is positivity. Poetry is all about hope. Even when the oppressor loses, even when the oppressor loses his or her power, the oppressed, when the oppressed is freed, that person will give some kind of consolation to the master or to the victor or to the person who oppressed. So that is a kind of relationship that you can see between men and women through the thematic contrast that we have in this poem. It's all about this slavery and freedom. It's all about this freedom of joy and slavery of grief or oppression. And whoever has strength, whenever they read this kind of poem, will have to realize this strength will be taken away by somebody else in future, particularly not another person with equal strength, but with but with but a person with less power. That the person with less power will have more mental strength to gain power over a period of time. It takes time to gain power, and when they do it, when they get it, then they use it not to hurt the oppressor, but to gain freedom for oneself. Yes, enjambment in this uh, there is a question about enjambment and caesura. I explain that enjambment through this poem for you. Look at this first line. Now you are strong, and that line there is no comma, there is no full stop in the at the end of the first line, and so it continues. And now you are strong, and we are but grapes aching with ripeness. In the second line, you can see a full stop. So the first line without a comma, without a full stop, continues into the second line. That is called enjambment, run on line. We have a very ordinary expression, run on line. The first line runs on into the second line. Caesura is a comma. We don't have comma in this. In between, say now you are strong. Suppose now you have a comma there. That means caesura. In between, between the first word and the last word of a single line, if you have comma in between, you have caesura. That means there is a pause. If you have more number of pauses, that means the poem will move slowly. There will be some kind of obstacle in the flow of our reading. Many pauses means it will take more time for us to read. That means we have to understand the connection between one point and another and make the connection. Only then we can keep on moving. So please look at another poem where you can see a comma. Normally comma will be there, or colon or semicolon will be there. If you find such semicolon, colon, comma, these are the three punctuation marks, or even dashes may be there, M dash, that is single dash, or double dashes may be there, then you can see that there is caesura. Caesura means it looks like a technical term. It simply means pause. When you have more pauses, you are taking more time to read the poem. That means the flow is disrupted. In this poem, the flow is not disrupted, it moves on. from the beginning to the end. Of course, we have full stops at the end of line number 2, line number 5, line number 9 also we have, and then at the end, line number 13 also we have full stop. So at the end of, when you have full stop, that ends. We don't have any problem with that. Yes. Now, we have looked at the thematic contrast. Let's move on to poetic devices. Like alliteration, if you are able to identify other poetic devices, it will be very nice if you can mention in the chat box. Already we saw alliteration. Alliteration, yes. Where is it? Apostrophe, yes. Apostrophe you have seen. That is the address at the beginning. Alliteration in line number 3 and 4. That is 3. 3 crushes. We don't have that. Crushes, that will not be an example for alliteration. Subtle strength, that is line number 6. There, subtle strength, that there we can have alliteration. Please pay attention and identify. Squeeze from us all the brave life, all the brave life. I don't see any alliteration there. You can notice actually where else can steal your senses. In line number 11, you can see steal your senses. Subtle strength is one example of alliteration, and this steal your senses is another alliteration. Now, these two alliterated phrases can be connected in terms of theme, subtle strength and steal your senses. What is the connection between the two? You can try to see the connection. Yes. Every line begins with a capital letter here in this poem. Is there any significance? Who is that? Yes, Vinita has asked this question. This is traditional. This is one way of distinguishing prose from poetry. You have a paragraph. In a paragraph, normally the first sentence begins with a capital letter, and whenever you end a sentence, thereafter a new sentence begins with a capital letter. But in the case of poetry, it is poetic convention that every line begins with a capital. That's one convention. Conventionally, it is done to distinguish it from prose. But nowadays, modern poets, some of you may be familiar with a poet called E. Cummings. That poet, even his own name, you see, E, he writes with small letter. Another E, he writes with small letter. Cummings, Cummings, he writes with small letter. And there are many others. They have done that. And we have something called prose poem. And in prose poems, you will not have lines like this. You may have something like a paragraph. So, depending on the poet's attitude life, if the person is very rebellious, that person may use more experiments like prose poem. If the person is more cooperative, that person may use the conventions, poetic conventions, traditional conventions given by our predecessors, and then within those conventions, they may try to do some kind of experiment. Yes, when you write some poem with small letters like this, that means there is more of freedom or democratic spirit. One line is not different from another line. Everything is equal. When you use one capital letter, that means other letters are not capital. That means they are not equal. So this kind of equality is emphasized, or democratic spirit is emphasized when you use small letters. That is a significance of using all small letters. All are equal. Okay. Now, we have seen this apostrophe as noted by Vinita. Now, we have mentioned metaphor. Let's pay a little more attention to the metaphor. We are grapes. Women are grapes. You are crushers. Crusher is a machine. Remember? Crusher, a person who may crush somebody. And we also have a machine to crush sugar cane or this kind of grapes or other fruits to get juice. Yes, in this case, this wine, just one, it starts with the grapes, and then the same grapes or same wine is extended throughout the poem. Actually, in the second stanza, you can see that the wine, the effect of wine, has this idea of stealing your senses, your intelligence, your ability to think for yourself. It's very interesting. The metaphorical idea of wine, grapes is extended to the second stanza as well. That is conveyed, and actually, keg, even that word keg tells us that the metaphor is extended till the last line of the first stanza, and then further it is extended in the that is where you can see when it is extended like this, you can even think of it as a conceit, but this is not very far-fetched metaphor like done, so that conceit, that expression, we need not use it here. Extended metaphor is good enough. Now, when you squeeze, normally what we understand is squeezing lemon. So when we squeeze, we give pressure. We take out the spirit, the soul, the sap, the essence of something. So grapes, we can think of lemon squeezing. Compare one fruit with another fruit. And then yawning kegged, desire. What is kegged? What is kept under pressure? What is closed, shut up and kept closed away from all other people? That is kegged, yawning, desire for freedom, independence, desire for some one's own way of life. That is kept, stored, saved, and kept in the dark. That also remember imprisonment. Normally, you go to prison houses, you will see that they may not be so well lit. When you keep people in dark room, that means you are not showing them light. That means you are not giving them freedom to see the world. You close the auditory and the visual senses of people. We are not allowing them to see the world or hear the world. That means we cut off people from the rest of the world by blocking this sound and also blocking this vision or light. Pushed out of memory. That's why this crushing, it's not only crushing and kept in a container, but also pushing out from the memory of people, away from the dominant discourse, away from this central location or center. This is, if you when I use the word center, we go to a little higher level of this conflict between center and periphery, and center of power and the margin or periphery of powerlessness. You can even bring in this idea of deconstructive theory here. If you are able to do it, I'll be very happy. If not, doesn't matter. Use your knowledge, whatever you have learned from the course, use your knowledge to explain the poem as much as you can. And finally, what happens? How do we understand the subtle strength? The wine kept under the earth steals the senses of the man or the person who drinks the wine. And so, steal your senses. The intellectual power or the mind that is used to control others is stolen. The switch that controls others is stolen by the person who is controlled or oppressed. That's how when you start engaging with the poem, you will find your own thought process, your own understanding expanding tremendously. That's what I see happening now, and it will happen to you as well. Yes, reification, when you glorify something, you will find it. Now, transferred epithet. We have one transferred epithet. Nobody has noticed it yet. Can you try and locate where is this transferred epithet? Can somebody try and type it out here? Yes. Yes, there is something called protest poetry. When you protest against some kind of injustice, when you write about your own thoughts and ideas in the form of a poem, that is called protest poetry. This is a subtle poem. This may not be called a protest poem, though the title is to the oppressors. It doesn't show any sense of um, anger, direct anger against the oppressor. Yes, Vinita, thank you for getting it. Lonely twilight. Twilight is a time of the evening. How can that twilight be lonely? And the person who is in that twilight, whether it is a man or woman, that person is lonely. So that is uh, twilight is lonely. Twilight is transferred epithet. That's an example. And then some element of symbol, some idea of symbol is conveyed through twilight as well. Time of the day is, it is twilight. It indicates it is a kind of opening to the dark, but it symbolically it opens power as well for women. When the man gets to twilight, the woman goes up to the dawn. And similarly, winter, your summer, when we are in summer, we are happy, we are jubilant, we are victorious. But when we come to winter, these 4 seasons of the year, some of you may have heard about Northrop Frye. The name of Northrop Frye, Frye, we mentioned in our course when we discussed pre-romantic poetry, um, this post-Augustan poetry, like that. When we discussed that age of sensibility, like Fry mentioned it, he used some spring, summer, uh, autumn, and winter to understand the whole of poetry or whole of literature through this archetypal criticism. So this your winter, it can be a symbol of the suffering of anybody for that matter. But in this case, your winter refers to the winter of men. Similarly, winter's grief. Now you can see, can anybody identify? Yes, good. Personification. Winter's grief. Winter is symbolically presented, personified as a person. How can winter feel the grief? Only a person like winter, or winter like a person feel the grief. Similarly, grapes aching with ripeness. My heart aches with pain. That's what my heart aches. That's what Keats said. So here, grapes aching. Things are given this power to feel, that is personification. So within this short poem of 13 lines, you can see so much happening here. So we have looked at some of the basic poetic devices like apostrophe, metaphor, transferred epithet, symbol, again metaphor, alliteration. Can anybody else see anything else? If you can see, that is well and good. I chose your poem in such a way that we will not be able to have access to any kind of analysis of this poem on the internet. So we will do it on our own. We have to compel ourselves to do it on our own without depending on some other source. If you are able to do it, then we can really learn how to analyze a poem. If we depend on some other source, then we will be it will be slow in our learning. That's it. Okay, now we come to the third part of our analysis. First we read the poem, try to understand the poem, uh, pay attention to the thematic contrast. Then we analyze the poetic devices. Thereafter, the third stage is rhyme, rhythm, and meter. Some questions were there, I will address them. How do we understand the rhythm of a poem? We can see that here. Um, in this case, alliteration will help us to understand the repetition of sound in subtle strength, steal your senses. And also, one more device, we have assonance. We also have some other device called consonants. These consonants we can see in lonely twilight. Lonely twilight, we gave this as an example of transferred epithet. At the same time, la sound is repeated low, li, then twilight. Three L sounds are there in these two words. So that can be considered consonants. And then thematically, we can see the repetition of strong or strength and this crush and squeeze. These two words are thematically, they are repetitive. And then this kind of repetition will help us to understand the sound patterns within this poem. Now, let's pay some attention to the rhyme, rhythm, and meter. Do we see any word rhyming with any other word? I did not see here. If you can see, that will be good. Um, Actually, yes, this kind of one analysis of this poem you have to do with reference to. I hope some of you have seen the sample question paper I have given. It is available on our course page. Please do look into the sample question paper. That will be good for you. Um, Here, I wanted you to look at the rhyme, rhythm. Rhyme, I did not see any word rhyming with each other. That means there is some kind of discord, there is some kind of disharmony within this relationship between the two. When you have some rhyme, that means there is some harmony, there is some kind of cooperation, there is some kind of finality, there is some stability. But in this case, we don't have rhyme. That means some kind of conflict is there, and that conflict is indicated, the idea of conflict is indicated through lack of rhyme in this poem. I hope some of you notice that. And then when it comes to rhythm, we have this iambic rhythm or trochaic rhythm. We have mentioned such things: iamb, trochee, spondy, pyrrhic, anapest, dactyl. Even in one case, we mentioned ambibrac. Some of you, I hope, remember this. And these terms, if you remember, that will be very good for you. Now, look at the line and count the syllables, count the words. Now you are strong. Now you are strong. Only four syllables. Four words are there, four syllables are there. All the four words are monosyllabic words. That means they have only one syllable in each. Now you are strong. We can easily divide this into, we can call it iambic dimeter. Iamb means, normally when we say I am, you have to understand the meaning. Iamb means a word with unstressed and stressed pattern. First word will be unstressed, second word will be stressed. So now you, the you is a pronoun. If you want to emphasize you as a pronoun, you can pay attention to it. You can call it I am. Or if you want to pay attention to time, now, then that will become trochee. So I thought you could, because this poem has the conflict between, contrast between you and we, though they are pronouns, they receive more emphasis. Now we can consider that as unstressed and you as more stressed. And so I am, you can call it, and then or verbs, this kind of verb is, was, and be form verbs, they don't get much emphasis, so they are not stressed. The word strong is stressed, as you can see. So I am, now you, I am, or strong I am. So put together, I am, iambic dimeter. Meter depends on the number of syllables in the whole line. There are only four syllables, so each two syllables will constitute one foot. And if you have dactyl and anapest, then three syllables will be there. So in this case, we have only 4 syllables, and these 4 syllables can be divided into 2 groups, 1 foot and another foot, so diameter. And then like this, we can go on analyzing the whole poem, iambic. And then next one, and we and we are but grapes aching with ripeness. 10 syllables are there. We have to count actually. And we are but grapes. 2 vowel letters are there, A and E. That doesn't mean that there are 2 syllables. Grapes, it is plural. Still, it is only 1 syllable. A, next, a king with ripeness. 10 syllables are there. That means here we have something like penta, exactly meter, pentameter, that we can say pentameter only after looking at this number of syllables. Now, what kind of pentameter? Is it iambic pentameter or something else? And we, yes, we said earlier, we can emphasize you and we are very. Yes, when we have only 3 syllables, doesn't matter. You may have in one word, if you have happiness, for example, if you look at a word like happiness, you will find 3 syllables. That will automatically become an example of happiness. I have noted it here. That will become dactyl. One, if you have like this, and also you will, for example, you have to put up, a word like to put up or my circus or the morning. If you have like that, then that will become amphibrach. Amphibrach, I did not spend too much time in our course, but then if you know I am, trochee, spondy, these 3 at least, if you know, and then 2 more, dactyl and anapest. Dactyl, 1 stressed and 2 unstressed. Anapest, 2 unstressed and 1 stressed. This word poetry itself is an example of dactyl poetry. So if you are able to remember some key words or key examples, if you are able to remember, you can help easily. When you have, as I hope you understand, 3 syllables, normally we don't, 3 syllables, if they form 1 foot, then that is monometer. If you can't split that into 2 syllables into 1 foot, and then see a single syllable into another foot, then some extra, in some cases, in some lines, some extra syllable may be there. That's what I have indicated in some poems we have discussed. 1, 2, 3. Here actually we have one, of your winter's grief. Look at the last line of this poem. Of your, of 1 syllable, your another syllable, winter 2 syllables, winter 2 syllable, then you have grief. You have 5 syllables here. You are asking about 3 syllables. Now here we have 5 syllables. Then how do we describe this? What is the rhythm, or how do we note it? So here, of your winter's grief. Can anyone try that? I have told you about am, spondy, dactyl, anapest. So in the same line, we may have 2 syllables coming together to make 1 foot, and then 3 syllables coming together to make 1 foot. So when we have 2 feet like this, 1 foot with 2 syllables and another foot with 3 syllables, we will have a diameter. So in that way, we can understand it. Of your winter's grief. This is the first one, of your wind. Winter normally has a first stress on the first syllable, wind. So that can be an example of this anapest. So if you understand that, that will be very easy for you. So one anapest foot and another I am foot. So exactly, we can't say iambic pentameter, iambic diameter like this. In this case, we can't say. We have to analyze lines like this and identify the dominant meter. If it is certainly this is not, pentameter is not the dominant meter in this poem. because only one line, the second line alone has 10 syllables. Other lines may not have that. So iambic may be dominant, iambic meter may be, iambic rhythm may be dominant, but when it comes to meter, maybe like this. In the case of crashes, you have only one foot there. So that is the only one where we have one foot. And in other cases, we have die, try, in dark, forgotten places. That again refers to 5 syllables. So to steal your senses, again 5. Some kind of unequal relationship is established through this kind of asymmetrical sound patterns or structural patterns. Even in metrical patterns you can identify. Thanks for paying yes, thanks for asking me this question. As we are looking into the rhythm of this, the rhythm is asymmetrical, or the meter is asymmetrical. That shows the relationship between men and women, which is not equal. So we can pay attention to the meter or rhythm like this. Normally, you will find common speech pattern is brought into the poem by the poet. A poet who listens to the voices of people will be able to bring in the common speech pattern very easily. Then it's more like free verse that you may have noted. There are various lines you could have seen. The diction, the words are very common words. One thing that I wanted you to notice is about register. Please look up any dictionary, register, words according to the use in particular areas. So this poem uses the register from wine industry and applies it to human industry. That's how I have put it here. It's a very strange thing that the poet tries to do it. The form of the poem is it's a lyric, it's a personal lyric, and the 13 lines may have some religious connotation as well. It's a kind of overpowering or overtaking of power from I have not exactly asymmetrical meter, polymmetrical. The poem is polymmetrical, like that you can mention. Please remember multiple meters. When you have same many meters, you can use that word polymmetrical. The poem is polymmetrical. Different meters are there. Then I have overall impression, because in a short line like this I may not be able to formulate the ideas here. I right in front of you I have written down the lines. Let me read out those lines and then conclude the session. Just 5 lines I have noted down. So in the same way I expect you to write 4 or 5 lines about the overall impression of this poem that you may have. Let me read out. Please listen carefully. And in case you want to have this copy, I can share it with you through our mail group. Polymaris to the Oppressors is a 13-line free verse poem on the exploitation of women in a patriarchal and racist society. If you pay attention to the word skin, you can understand white skin, black skin. The speaker addresses men directly about their present strength, which she will challenge and overcome soon, indicating a strong hope for the freedom of women from the oppression of men. Her historical desire for freedom, centuries of yearning, please remember that. Her historical desire for freedom is stronger than any other force on earth. She tactfully suggests, cleverly suggests that her endurance of suffering is a means to bring about the grief to the oppressor. She strategically, I'm using that word strategy very carefully, she strategically uses the metaphor of wine crushing, referring to the women's oppression, and converts the metaphor of wine receiving potent power by holding it in kegs for a long time. This is a kind of radical revision. That's what we have to notice. What does the poet do by writing this poem? This is a kind of radical revision of the image of wine in literature, using the same source of oppression as a source of freedom. Perhaps that is what I meant by deconstruction. The poem deconstructs the power relationship between men and women. Perhaps the poem connotes the paradoxical idea that in oppression lies freedom. We have to open our eyes, we have to open our ears to see the path for freedom. In the same oppressive area or element, we have freedom. If we open our eyes, if we open our ears, we can see freedom, we can hear freedom. Uh, in one or two lines, you can conclude saying that this is a feminist poem on the unequal or unequal relationship between men and women, which the poem deconstructs. Or if you don't want to use a word like deconstruct, you can say it shows the contradictions in life and aims at bringing in some kind of equality in society between men and women. Thank you so much for attending this class today. Thank you for your input. That gives me some hope that will you have followed the lectures carefully, and then you are able to understand the poem and help yourself with analyzing the poem. If you have more live sessions like this, by interacting with each other, you'll be able to learn more. But I think you are able to understand through the videos so much. If you, in case you have more questions, please send them through the discussion forum. We will continue to discuss and grow in our life. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Shall we close now?